coming up, and they parked the green car in front of your house, that meant you either died or something bad happened. And you hear people hollering at Vietnam vets. And here we were on gurneys and that, and they were still hollering at us, calling us baby killers. I remember that. And did a rat patrol at night. Stupid. I thought I only died twice, and then, as you know, those that died young, 19 and 20, 18, 17, they're on that wall, will never have the opportunity that I've had. I'll grow old, but they'll always stay the same.
Well, we're rolling, John.
Yes, sir.
How's it going?
Doing well?
Good, good. We have very special guests today.
Yes, we do.
Gil Hernandez from Elko, Nevada. And I ended up kind of meeting him through, I actually saw something on social media about him through Chuck Adams.
Good friend.
And yeah, very good man and a legend, as you are as well.
Oh.
Yes, you are.
He is.
But I saw something he had posted, and you know, he was going to meet up with you, and I thought, man, he's down here in Elko, so close, you know. And I was thinking, I'd love to get somebody like you, especially when I saw, you know, read the story he put on you about being a Vietnam veteran, which I cannot tell you how much I appreciate the service that you put in for this country and all of us today. But so I got a hold of a friend of mine, Jim Algerio, who I thought if anyone's going to know Gil, it's going to be Jim. And sure enough, he did. And we were fortunate enough to have you contact us back. So sincerely appreciate that. So,
Well, I just appreciate you guys doing what you do, you know, informing archers out there, or people that are willing to try to learn the sport that we have.
yeah.
And the opportunity there. It's a good family sport, as you know, if you had your family members in there before. But it's a really good opportunity, and I've enjoyed quite a few years. Not always being successful, but I was a target shooter for a long time. I did quite well on that. But it's a good family sport, and I'm just glad that you guys are doing what you're doing and informing people, or maybe encouraging other people that are maybe of my age that are thinking about putting away their equipment and not hunting anymore, because that's a shame.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And we're losing. It's unfortunate because we are losing, little by little, we are losing hunters. And I wish, you know, we could say it's going the other way, but the way things are nowadays, it just seems like it's kind of going away. Hopefully it'll come back some more. But real quick, let's talk a little bit about your background, if you don't mind, like where you're born and raised. And
Well, I was born in Eagle Pass, Texas. My mom worked at the PX in the Air Force Base, and my dad was from Mexico when came over, and he worked in the cotton fields and that. And I remember as a young boy, my dad telling me, maybe that's why I remember, put me in a gunny sack, and we'd go out and he'd collect cotton in Texas and southern Colorado. I guess they had cotton fields down in there before. He finally got a job on the railroad, which took us to California from Texas, and we lived in Redding, California for a while. And I went to school in Truckee, California, because he was a railroader, and then he got bumped. At that time, a person could bump another person, which meant that they had more seniority on the railroad. So my dad had to go and do the same to somebody else. So he went to Ogden, Utah, and we started out at Ogden, Utah. I lived there for just a little while until my dad got his job, of all places, Lucien, Utah, which is just on the border of Nevada, Utah, where we went to school. We rode the train in the morning, 101, and then the train back to LeMay and Allen, where we lived, different times, 102 from school.
Really?
One room schoolhouse.
wow.
And our teachers lived up in Gross Creek, Utah, which is just on the south side of Idaho border there too. Raft River furnished
Okay.
the
Yeah.
power for that area, and a lot of you are familiar with Raft River.
Yeah.
So. And so lived in Lucien for quite some time. My dad was working on the causeway across the Great Salt Flat, the dirt one that goes clear across at that time. When they finished that up, my dad says, well, we got an opportunity to move either to Ogden, Utah or Montello, Nevada. Where would you guys like to go? We'd been to Ogden, Utah, mainly just downtown all the time, so we didn't really like that. But we told our dad that we wanted to move to Montello.
Wow.
So in 1959, in the summer of '59, we moved to Montello, and that's where I stayed and basically grew up and went to school there and do a lot. We had a high school there, but I was in junior high. My brother and I were both on the varsity team. My brother was just a little guy, and he was 00, and his jersey, you could tie him 2 people around that thing, so we had to tie it around him. But we both lettered, on the varsity team because they didn't have enough to play basketball, and we had a really good basketball team back in those days.
Yeah.
And then later on, they took the high school away from us. So my brothers and my sister, sisters and brothers, we all rode the school bus 51 miles one way.
Wow.
So it was 102 miles. And the only way was 1 mile because we got off the road there to Cobury, which was a mile. So it's 102 miles every day.
Wow.
So a lot of times we leave at before the sun came up, in the winter, and it was after the sun went down. So most of the time we just spent doing our homework by lanterns. My mom and dad never had electricity then, and we had an outhouse. A lot of people don't even know what an outhouse is. It's a little bit better than going out behind a bush or something like that. But yeah, those times were kind of tough. We had water in the house, but we had oil stoves, but oil lanterns and stuff like that. So it was quite the deal growing up, but I think we had a good life. We played out in the desert. We go catch lizards and horny toads, and when a big rain come, a little pond that didn't have anything in it, somehow the frogs would come out of the soil, because of the moisture. But we had a good life there, and I don't mind it until I got old enough. And then not too long, actually when I was in high school, I won a 120-day delay plan and joined the Marine Corps.
Oh, wow.
Before that, I always wanted to join the Army. I always told my dad, for being a little kid, I don't know how I managed to say this, but I said, I'm going to join the Army and go and fight in war. And I didn't know at that time that I would be joining the service and going to Vietnam. So it was quite a deal at that time. But I took, and I didn't really know what I was going to do with my life after I graduated. I thought about going to bus driving school at that time. They had a good program back then. And then I thought, well, I'm just going to go ahead and go in the military and then see what comes out of that. So
Was the Vietnam War already going on at that time?
Vietnam War was going on pretty good. It started out around 65, somewhere in there, and in 64, but we had troops over there and observers and stuff like that already over there. And a good friend of mine had just come back. He joined the Marine Corps, and he'd gone over there and got back in 1967. And he came home to Montello, and he says, Gil, he says, I know that you're talking about maybe going into the Army. He says, I changed my mind and I'd go into the Marine Corps. He said, the only reason I say that, if you can go through the Marine Corps training, it's rougher for you, but you have a better chance of coming home. Mm-hmm. And I thought about it when he told me that, and I thought, well, I'll go ahead and try this. And I went to Marine Corps. The Marine Corps training itself, the physical fitness part, even though I had a hernia at that time too, that I never got fixed playing the tag football in Wales High School. But I went into the Marine Corps, and the physical part was not hard at all for me. I was in pretty good shape, but the mental part, they break you down mentally and then build you back up, so that when somebody says to do something, you don't even question it, just do it, Mm-hmm. So that part of it was pretty tough, because I always thought I was a pretty good kid at that time. And the drill instructors would get in my face and stuff like that. And then you got to remember, in the 60s when you went into the military, it's a lot different than it is now. They could actually kick you, hurt you, and and say it was somebody else.
Yeah.
So I try not to dwell on that a lot, but it made me a better person. And so I came out of the Marine Corps, or boot camp, and then from boot camp I went to advanced infantry training, which was in Camp Pendleton, and learned how to be a combat veteran. I was 0311, which means I was up front, point man. I was in the middle carrying radio, and then I was tail end Charlie, which was at the rear, just making sure everybody was tight and we were good to go. So I did a lot of those things while I was in Vietnam, and only lasted 4 months before I got hurt, and that was a bad time for me. We did a rat patrol at night. Stupid. I always told my tank commander, I was 0311, I was in charge of a fire team. And the way I became in charge of a fire team, we had our gunner got taken out, so they had an M14. And they asked who wanted an M14, and I said, I'll take it, because nobody else raised their hand. Little did I know it was an automatic weapon, and usually it was a machine gun or something like this. But at that point, it was a M14 with a selector on it, so it was fully automatic. Oh. And they had 7 pouches. I had double pouches. I had 14 magazines, 20 rounds each. So I carried that because I really liked it when I was in boot camp, training with it on the firing range too. I qualified with the M14 and the M16. And then, of course, rocket launchers and everything else. We had to be proficient in just about every weapon that would be in Vietnam at that time. And not only were we able to shoot them, I'll actually take them apart in the dark and make sure that we can put them back together, because, you know, in combat you never know when you have a little bit of time to clean your weapon, and you better make sure it can shoot. So, sure. So and then on that, the M16 was coming out at that time. It was a Mattel toy, we called it, and the front muzzle brake was more of a prong type deal. And I just had issues with that. And then later on, they came out with the forward assist. And some of you know, if you shoot M16s or something like that, the newer ones, on the side it's a little aluminum deal that you could, if the bullet wasn't going in real good, you could hit that and you could get the bullet to go in. Oh. And we lost a lot of guys because they didn't have that forward assist in combat, especially in situations where they were going to overrun us or stuff like this. So, so the weapons came along pretty good. But in my time, I was doing a rat patrol, assigned to a tank on a bridge. We had heavy casualties. We went up and retrieved wounded and dead from 1-9. They got ambushed really bad up on one of the hills that we would take, 101 north and 101 south, or 182, 181. I'm trying to remember my numbers now, but it was a bad area. The Walking Dead, which 1-9 Marines left there dead, and we had to go back and retrieve them after a while, and it was a bad situation because we got hit pretty bad. We had 2 companies go up there, and we had quite a few casualties. So rather than put us afloat, they put us on bridge security to guard the bridge on the highway going from Quezon to the pontoon bridges, we called. So we would do convoys and do sweeps on that every now and then. And it was our turn to go out, and we had just gotten hit by about 3 different mortars. No casualties or anything like that, but we couldn't even see our hand. As about 9:30, the tank commander comes over and says, "We're going on a rat patrol." I says, "I don't want to go." He says, "Well, you got to go. We have no choice. We have orders." And it was stupid because you go down the road, they can hear that tank coming, and there's a light on the front of the tank because you got to see the road. But we got ambushed, and tank commander got killed. I mean, not the tank commander, the tank driver. The tank commander was okay. And the tank I got hit the first time. A mortar or something hit behind the tank, missed a tank, but got my legs. The next one was either a satchel charge rocket or mortar, we don't know. Hit the track on the tank, and the tank is going forward. It hit the as you're driving, it hit the left-hand track. So what happens when you hit one track, as you know, that has a track, it'll pull to the other side.
Yeah.
So it pulled to the right, and that was the side that the cliff was on, that a river ran down. So the tank tipped over sideways, and when it tipped to go down the ravine, my guys, we all flew off of the tank. We got bucked off more or less. And the tank commander and his crew kept going down the hill, and the turret was pointing towards the bank at that time, which would have been to the left, and they used canisters. And I remember them saying that one of the canisters pinned one of the enemy into the bank. That's how bad that thing could shoot. And so I don't know what their casualties were, but I know that tank commander lost the driver, and all the time I thought MIA was KIA, which is killed in action. The other's missing in action. I didn't know that for a lot of years, and then I tried to reach out to him. Went on the computer. My wife still doesn't know how I did this, but I was able to find the unit, and then I asked him what happened to the tank crew, and they said, well, the tank crew's okay. They're not KIA like I thought. They did lose a tank driver, and they waited down there, down below in the ravine, and what happened is the tank got sideways in the canyon and couldn't go forward anymore, so it started digging in with the tracks, just going, one track was going and heated up. Pretty soon the rounds inside started touching off.
Oh.
That's how hot it got. So they waited until some of the rounds were touching off, and then there's a trap door in the bottom of the tank. They crawled out and went to the side where the track was, and there's a berm there, and they went over to the top of the berm and stayed there all night. I didn't know that at that time. I was still worried about my guys. And we did manage to get out of there, but it wasn't easy, and I told the radio man, click the mic 2 times, let them know we've been hit, so they let the tank crew knew that they could hear us, but the base there was a LZ Hawk, and they sent another tank and a couple of squads in front and behind.
Was it daylight by this time?
No, it was still dark, and it seemed, it's kind of like waiting for when you shoot a deer, you get impatient. It seems like a long time,
Right.
but it wasn't. But to me, it seemed like forever, and I was bleeding pretty good, and I had one of the guys put my battle dressing around my waist because I'd got hit in the back, and I could feel the blood oozing through there, and so I had him help me. I got my flak jacket off, and there was hardly anything left of it. It kind of reminded me of when you throw a rag in the fire and you go to pull it out, how it has all these holes in it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's how my flak jacket looked, and thank God I had it on, or probably wouldn't be here now. But it was one of those situations where you ask for help. I had a guy there. He helped me take my flak jacket off, put a battle dressing on me, and I had 6 grenades on me, and that's all we had. All the weapons were gone, and we were fortunate that those 6 grenades didn't go off. If you know when you're sitting down, if you have a pouch on your side, what happens a lot of times, the pouch will go to the back, and I had a piece of shrapnel come into my joint in my leg. It was lodged in there, but it missed the pouch. If that piece of shrapnel would have hit those grenades, and I had 6 of them, there wouldn't have been anything left of anybody there. But we're fortunate, and I guess God guided me and the shrapnel, but the shrapnel didn't hit the pouch, so we were lucky. And so I got the guy set out and told him to set up, in case they come down. And he had 6 grenades. He said, straighten the pins out, but don't pull it out. I said, get it ready, And when you do, I says, don't pop the spoon off of it. Just pull the pin and then pull the spoon off and wait. I says, it's going to seem like a long time, but just wait a few minutes and then throw the grenade. I says, I don't want them throwing that stuff back at us.
Oh, yeah.
As it was, we didn't have to do that. The tank came, the radio man keyed the mic twice. They knew whereabouts we were at. They came down looking for us with flashlights, and they finally found us. One of my
you
guys,
didn't have no lights probably at all.
no lights. We didn't have. I didn't have a flashlight.
You didn't know how bad you were
nope.
wounded, or
I didn't even, and I broke my right arm the ulna in two places. I didn't even know it at that time, and I was trying to use my arm. I didn't even know I'd broken my ulna in two places. And the radio man, and if you ever get in a place where something explodes to you really loud, you're kind of ringy anyway, and it sounds like you're in a can or something, and the guys are hollering at you, but it sounds like it's an echo, and it's kind of hard to explain unless you've been there. But I could hear the radio man, he'd say, "Hernandez, off me." And I could hear it, but it was like he was far away, and
Right.
and the ringing in my ears was just really, really bad from all three explosions
Yeah.
being so close to me. And I says, "I'm trying. I don't even. I just said it. I don't even know if it came out or not." But I was trying to get off the radio man. Finally got off the radio man, and then of course the battle dressing came next, and then we got rid of the grenades. And it seemed forever. Like I say, a tank came, and there were guys. And they came down and got us out of there. There was one guy that I had, I don't know how bad he was, but he seemed to be just as bad as myself or worse, because he was laying up closer to the maybe 20, maybe not even 20 yards, maybe 20 feet from the top of the road. They got him first, and then they came to get me and load me on the tank. And I said, "I don't want to get on that thing." I did not want to get on that tank, after what just happened.
Yeah.
Right.
And the tank seemed to be having problems, surging and stuff like that. But they finally got me on the front of the tank, and they went backwards the way they do. And we went back to LZ Hawk, and they brought a chopper in there. And I don't know how many times they went down there to get the rest of my guys or who was hurt. And to this day, I don't even know if any of them made it or who made it, didn't make it. It's one of those things. I went to a shrink one time, and they told me my mind is blocking whatever happened to protect me.
Mm-hmm.
And if people that probably seen something really bad, it'll happen to them the same way. But in veterans, it happens quite a bit. So I can't remember a lot of that part. I was only in Vietnam 4 months. I went on 3 different missions that I went on. Actually, the Tet was there in 1968. The opening of Pegasus was a highway, and then or road, and another one we had, and I can't remember what that one was. But so in the 4 months I was there, we saw a lot of action, did a lot of things.
Was that kind of would you say it was towards the peak of Vietnam? Or
1967 was a real peak, the hill fights over, and I was in I Corps, which is North Vietnam, and towards the DMZ and the north, and to North Vietnam. So in 1967, it peaked there during January. It was really bad. We lost a lot of guys in the hill fights, what they call. So when I came in 1968, it was the start of the Tet. So the start of the Tet was bad too, with really heavy casualties. If you look at your history, 1967 towards the last part, and 1968 towards the Tet, that part, those 2 months, January and February, were real bad for casualties for U.S. troops. So yeah, it was a bad time, not only in my area, but all the way down from DMZ down to South Vietnam. So all that area was being hit. The cities were being hit, but no place was really going to be safe for anybody. But I ended up getting heloed out that night, and the double-bladed helo came in at night. I could hear it, and the dust was blowing around me, and that red dirt that they had all over in those places. And I was on morphine. I know I was, because I had a corpsman with me. Probably saved my life there. But I remember the helicopter coming above us. I could hear it, and I guess I was coming in and out. I thought I was awake all the time, but no, they said I was in and out of consciousness. And I remember the helicopter coming down, and they had maybe the altimeter in the helicopter, but before he touched down, I remember he turned his light on, and it was bright light, and he shut it like a second just to see where he was at. Then he touched down. He touched down a little bit hard, because you can't see at night.
Yeah.
And for them to run a helicopter at night like that is really not usually common.
Mm-hmm.
But we knew we had heavy casualties there with my guys, and So they got me out of there and took me to Dong Ha, which is a makeshift MASH hospital. And that same night they got me there, and I remember them put me on a silver tray. I call them trays because there were probably places where they did surgery and stuff like that rather than a bed or something like this. It's where they do all their surgeries. There was 3 of them in there, if I remember looking around, and sandbags cleared the top of the roof. And they cut all my clothes off and felt my chest. I had a collapsed lung, and they stuck a tube down in my lung to drain it. And then I guess, I don't know, I heard that I died twice, but then they took me back to the morgue and put me aside where they fingerprint 2 guys that met Graves later. He was in there. They usually wash the bodies down real good and clean them up to make them presentable, and then put them in a plastic bag. And then you see those aluminum cases or whatever they have, they'll send them back to the States. And then they'll do another cleaning job, put you in uniform and stuff like that. I don't know if you've ever seen Saving Chance or Taking Chance about a Marine going back up to, I don't remember if it was Wyoming or somewhere, but the procedure they did on him is similar to the procedure they were doing on me.
It's called what, you said?
Taking Chance.
I'll have to watch that.
Yeah.
I did watch the video with you and Graves, and I couldn't remember if it was 2 or 3 times. I know you got passed back and forth.
Well,
Right.
that's what I say, and I thought I only died twice, and then so Graves is working. Graves registration is what they called it, and that, by the way, that became his motorcycle handle later on, and he was quite the character if you ever seen the video. But so I went there, and I don't know, must have moved or something. He said, no, this Marine's still alive. So they sent me back in there a second time. So I was on there. They pronounced me dead. They put me in grave registration. They're going to do fingerprints on me. So they set me aside. So they didn't even get to me then, but they saw I moved or something. So they sent me back into surgery, and they look at me, and in those days they didn't have the equipment that we have now to be able to tell if a person's breathing or even got a pulse. And I probably didn't have much of a pulse because I practically bled out. I think I only had maybe a pint of blood left in me, is what they told me. So anyway, the doctor there, Dr. Finnegan, he was a well-known heart doctor later on in Philly. He goes, well, he's dead now. So they sent me back to Graves registration, and he said, Gil, you never lost your place. We've just stuck you back over there on the concrete slab. He said, you never lost your place. We said, okay, he's gone, you know. So we're sitting there, and we're usually talking, and we're doing fingerprinting, and Bill Boswell was the other guy's name there. I don't know why I can remember it, but Graves told me his name, Bill Boswell. Him and Graves both doing fingerprinting, and the Graves says, hey, I got a bad feeling. I just saw that guy move again. And he says, you know, a lot of times when you're in there, bodies will move anyway as they're shutting down. Mm-hmm. They're twitching, or their muscles are relaxing or something like that. I always told Graves, probably like a rattlesnake. You cut it off its head and it moves around. He says, well, not that bad. You didn't move around that well. So he says, I saw some movement, and he says to Boswell, he says, I got a bad feeling about this guy. He says, that guy's still alive. So he went over there and started beating on me and using the techniques to get the heart going again. And I told him later, I said, so you beat the shit out of a dying man? He says, basically I did. He says, man, I just went to work on you, and there was blood oozing out all of your holes and stuff like this. And he says, this guy's still alive. Let's get him back in there. So they took me back into surgery, and the surgeons, rather than take a chance with, because Graves was really not hesitating on the language he used, you know, and about the squids in there, not knowing what the heck they were doing, or knowing what they were doing, and he went on and on. So he said, and Dr. Finnegan, he writes a book, and he says, so rather than sending back in there and have to hear about it from the Marines, we thought we'd go ahead and open up. And they call me, in his book, he calls me Lopez. And that book is in the Company of Marines, written by Dr. Finnegan.
Oh.
And he calls me Lopez in there because he didn't know my name. He just knew I was a Mexican, and so they called me Lopez. So which is fine, in the book. And later I tried to confront him on that. He said, "Well, I don't know if it was you or not, but Graves knew it was me because he confronted him because he was the one that was working on me."
Yeah.
But he didn't want to come out and admit that it was me in the book because I don't know if he thought I was going to try and take royalties or what.
Yeah, really.
Oh, Graves got really mad with him. And he says, "Well, you can't remember anything anyway now because you're older," which he was. So, and we were all older. But anyway, he cut me open and he massaged my heart, and they took 7 feet of small intestine out and sewed me back up. And I don't know what my large intestine looked like. I know they had holes in it too. And prepped me and set me aside. And he said, all of a sudden you started, and then put me some blood in me. And they gave me several pints of blood. And he said, all of a sudden, he says, you started moving and you started coming around. And he says, in a few hours, you were doing really good. By morning, it was daylight anyway. I was looking pretty good, so they put me on another helicopter, and Graves didn't know. He said, all I heard is when the helicopter would go up, he said, you would go out, die. And then when it come down, you were okay. So I must have been
Changing
going in and
pressure.
out, the pressure, altitude. And he said the helicopters didn't dare fly too low because they were still from there to where they were going before they got across the ocean there. The enemy could still shoot you down, and they love shooting helicopters down,
I bet.
or even airplanes. But that's what he heard, so he never did know what happened. Later on, a few years later, he tells a story too that he's the one that tells the story, and that's later on. I also joined the Veterans of Foreign Wars, and they wrote an article on Vietnam veterans and PTSD, which I suffer highly with and lived with for over 54 years, 1968 when I got wounded. But there was an article on there about Vietnam vets and coping with PTSD. And he'd asked one of his friends, another Marine there, he says, can you do me a favor? He says, I know this guy's name is Hernandez. He says, I don't know what his first name is or if he's even alive. So this guy that he asked, he has to go to the bathroom. He takes 2 magazines into the head with him. He's going to read, as we usually do. That's our company time. But he has 2 magazines. I don't even know what the other one was. He says, the one was a VFW magazine. And Gil, he says, your story in there about PTSD was highlighted in yellow, and that's how they do when they talk about a story. And he says, oh, man, he saw that. He says, oh, this is the guy that Graves looking for.
Oh, wow.
Hernandez, So he went after he did his thing, and he called Graves. He says, Graves, he says, I found this guy's name. His name is Gilbert Hernandez, or Gil Hernandez, they call him. And you need to call him. So he didn't even wait for Graves to call me. I get a message from this guy. I don't know how I found my number and contact him. Well, he was in VFW, so he might have called somebody.
Yeah.
But he didn't have my cell number at that time. But he called my home house number, left a message. My wife goes, you need to listen to this message. And I listened to the message. That's why we have
Answer machine.
an answer machine, because I want to make sure I hear messages right, because I rent the hall out too, and I do other things too. But so I listened to this message, and it's this guy says, Gil, you didn't die twice. You died 3 times. And he says, I want you to talk to this guy that was in Graves registration, and he knows you personally. And I go, really? And I'm thinking, and I'm hearing this message, and you got to remember, when you haven't heard anything like that for a while, and me being a Vietnam veteran, it just took me back to the time when I was in Vietnam. And I got to tell you, I had a heck of a time.
I bet.
I had a heck of a time just thinking about all this. So I didn't call him that day. I think I waited a couple of days. And the phone number was on there. I called Graves on that phone. And I talked to him, and we must have talked for an hour, you know. And I said, well, we got to meet. I says, I'm on the, I think I might have even been department commander in 2007, 2008. I was a department commander for the Veterans of Foreign Wars for the state of Nevada. So he said, we got to meet. I said, well, I'm going to Washington, D.C. Because I'm on the on this committee that I'm on. And he says, great. He says, maybe we can meet at the wall. So we thought that would be a good opportunity.
Yeah.
After so many years, we finally met at the wall. And that's where that video comes in. Patrick Humes, he's a Chula, I think he was at. He's also a Marine. He's a professional photographer for Rolling Thunder. And he also does a lot of his own stuff, you know, that he does for different things. Gold Star Families. POWMI is really heavy on that, but he would happen to be on that bus. I mean, he got a bus. There must have been a 40 or 50 passenger bus, and he had everybody probably in Philly there, that Darby, that he knew, and he had.
You talking about Graves?
Yeah, Graves had this bus full of people, and his wife too, at that time, Donna, and he had the bus full, and so I'm in Washington, D.C. anyway, so I told him what time I could probably get away from my other duties with the VFW. So I took a friend of mine, Mike Musgrove, with me, and we went to the wall. And if you know how the wall is, we came in from the bottom end facing the Capitol, or Lincoln Monument. And I was walking along there, and I thought, well, I don't know how I'll recognize Graves or not, but because I didn't see a picture of him, I didn't really know what he looked like. And so I started walking down there, and a lady was standing right there where the V comes to the center of the wall down below, and had my hat on and my jacket, and she says, "Are you looking for Graves?" And I thought, yeah, well, who are you, you know? How do you know? She says, "Are you looking for Graves?" And I says, "Yeah, I'm looking for Graves." He's on the other end waiting for you on that end. I didn't know how she knew it was me, but
Right.
so I says, well, okay. So I started heading that way, and Mike headed with me, and I met Graves, you know, at the other end, and it was kind of an emotional meeting, you
imagine.
know, meeting the guy that beat me up and saved my life, you know.
Right.
But and he had a really good friend that got killed in Vietnam while he was there too. And as you've seen the story, he lost a whole bunch of his own guys there.
Yeah.
So he goes to the wall and pays his respect. But this one guy that he went to school with, and that he had a picture of him there, and he had some flowers. And so him and I talked a little bit there, and we try to get caught up. But it's kind of hard getting caught up with 50 people around you, and people wanting to know what's going on. So Graves and I kind of stood there for a while, and we just answered a few questions that people had.
Right.
But I had my jacket on that I had as commander, and I took it off. I just jokingly said, "See, Graves," I says, "I'm still in pretty good shape." He looks at me, "Yeah, you're pretty good shape," considering, you know. But we had a good discussion there, and since then, every year, my birthday was just April 25th. That's my born-on date that he saved me. Every year since we met, I call him up and thank him for giving me the life that I have.
That's awesome.
Because as you know, those that died young, 19 and 20, 18, 17, they're on that wall, will never have the opportunity that I've had. I'll grow old, but they'll always stay the same. And you can look at that wall and you see a reflection of yourself, but you can kind of remember the guys that you served with, even though you don't know their name, because it wasn't appropriate for you to know that guy's name because he might not be there
Right.
in a few minutes or the next day. But it's really a moving thing. It helped me out a lot to meet this guy called Graves. I happened to see him when we were there. I said, "Graves, it's a good thing I didn't meet you sooner because I might not have liked you." And he said, just like this, he says, "Hey, dude, what makes you think I would have liked you?" And you got to remember, this guy was a member of a really bad motorcycle group. He was wanted in 7 states. He was a druggie, alcoholic, you name it. He did the part, and he's been clean for over 20 years now.
Awesome.
So I admire him for that. And when his wife passed away, what a sweetheart. My wife and her hit it off, and he paid for our rooms, and we went to the boardwalk and on the East Coast, and we stayed for a week, and everybody got along really good, and we just had some downtime. He liked to run. I ran with him a little bit, and his wife made fun of him. She said, "What are you trying to do, kill Gil now?" Because, I can run, but not like he does. I mean, he's just awesome, and he has no fat on himself. He's a kickboxer, and he trained his grandkids to do the same, and he's just a fantastic guy. I mean, I wouldn't want to go up against him. In fact, he trained cops.
Oh,
After
really?
all that ordeal with the cop situation, I don't seen that movie. I can't remember who's in it, but he pulls over a file cabinet and keeps the cops from coming in the room, and he goes out the other side door. That's basically what he did, but he didn't pull anything. He locked the door. When the sheriff came and asked him, he says, "Yeah, the sheriff called me up, says, Graves, he said, I want to have a meeting with you." He said, "I didn't think anything about it." But he says, "You got to remember, I was wanted in 7 states." So he went in there and sat down in the chair, and he said, "What you got going, Chief?" And he says, the chief says, "Well, we're going to arrest you today." He said, "What?" He got up, locked the door, and went out the side door and
That's
took off.
hilarious.
Wow.
So it wasn't too long after that, he straightened himself out. But you got to admire him for this. He trained cops on hand-to-hand situations, and one of his good friends when I went there worked for the police department there, and thought the world of Graves, and for what he did for the police department and that. But and I met him when I went to meet him later. I think it was maybe a couple of years later. We actually met Graves, and we went to the boardwalk. His wife, my wife, and I can't remember if he had kids there or not. But it was an awesome reunion that we had there. And then later, when his wife passed away from cancer, it was really hard on him. I can't believe that he didn't go to drinking or doing other things, but it's the kind of person he is. And to this day, his wife is still in an urn. He's waiting till the day that he dies, and he doesn't know why. He's been given so many opportunities, and I think it's because what we do.
Right.
Both of us are veterans advocates. We fight for veterans, and we try to help out veterans, especially Iraq and Afghanistan veterans. And another thing that we didn't have in my time, we didn't have a lot of women serving in the military. Mm-hmm. But now, as you know, the makeup of women in the military is big. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that I fought for when I go, and others that are in my position too, every state has a veterans advocate like myself. And we go back and we fight for veterans' women veterans issues that they have, because they're different. And the way they were treated, they would go to the VA hospital and they would say, "What is wrong with your husband?" And they would say, "It's not my husband, it's me." And they would look at him kind of funny. So it took a long time before we got that straightened out. Now most females that go into the VA hospital are asked if they are the veterans. They make sure that they're respected, mm-hmm. because they earn the same respect that I have serving mm-hmm. Our country in whatever capacity. So they're veterans, and it hasn't been easy, but the VA has come around and with a lot of different things, that we fought for women. We have women in my position, and we like that, because us as males, we don't know what some of the situations that they go through that they need care
Sure.
for. So we fight for them, and it's good to have females on our committees also, and that's what we had along one time. Is there was mostly males, so we had females come from every state. So many come, and they got to address us there at the legislature, our committee, and tell us some of the things that are issues, so we could bring them up to our representatives and see if they could knock that out, and so they're not issues. So,
Yeah.
but that's a lot of my part of my story, as a childhood, going into military. And I know this is a archery type deal, but there for a while when I first got out in 1969, I got out. I spent over a year in the hospital learning how to walk. They told me I'd never walk again. My broken arm was in a cast for about a year. It was broken in 2 places, and shrapnel in my rear and my back. I was in Oak Knoll Naval Hospital for over a year.
Do you still carry any?
Yeah, I
shrapnel?
still have shrapnel, and not too long ago I had a piece of shrapnel taken out of my rear, of all places.
Really?
So the guys kid me, "Oh, you were running, huh?" Hernandez, you were running. I know you weren't fighting the enemy. I said, "No." I said, "That happened when I got turned
came
over
in.
by a blast from the side," and they start laughing. "We're just kidding you." So it feels like somebody holding a cigarette real close to you, and how
Yeah.
it starts burning a little bit. Well, my rear started having a spot there where it started getting hot, and I mean, it's a burning sensation. And sometimes I'd turn around, make sure nobody had a lighter there or a cigarette, and it wasn't there. But finally, I went into the VA. This is probably about 5 years ago. I still have shrapnel working out, but
Yeah.
I went in and talking about females being certain things. I went in there for an appointment. I thought, well, I'm going to get an appointment, and they're going to give me an appointment date to come back so they can do surgery on my rear and take that metal out, because they found out it was metal. They did X-rays on it. And I've got several other pieces back there too. So I get on the little gurney there, and they probe me and take X-rays, and I said, "So when are we going to take this out?" And I made a mistake earlier that 2 doctors come in there. I didn't know that at the time. One's a female. I just assumed that she was a nurse. So I go, "Nurse, your nurse said that maybe they were going to take the shrapnel out today." He says, "Mr. Hernandez, I want you to know that's no nurse. That is a doctor." I said, "Oh, forgive me." So, man, I was really trying to talk nice to her after that, because I'd open my mouth like, we do sometimes.
Sure.
So she has me down on the gurney, and I'm thinking, she says, "We're going to pull it out right now." And I says, "I didn't mean that comment earlier about you being She
Man.
says, you're going to be fine." So they took the piece of shrapnel out right then and there that I didn't know. I figured they'd schedule me for surgery or something. No.
Right.
She gave me some deadener around there, and I could feel her tugging, and it took quite a while of her pulling it on there and cutting around there. And if you see, sometimes you have a splinter or something like this, or
Yeah.
something gets in you, what happens, the body will form like a callus around there. It's like when you get a callus from working too hard, some of you, on your hands.
Like scar tissue
Yeah,
type
scar
stuff.
tissue. Well,
Yeah.
it'll form a scar tissue, and it's a protective ring or a pod around this shrapnel. And she was trying to cut all the roots away from it and get it out of there, and she was having a heck of a time. So she was pulling on it with those forceps that are locked, and I could feel her pulling on it. Finally, she got it cut out, and it was a piece of shrapnel as big as a .38 bullet head. Most of you can relate to that.
Huh.
So, and she gave it to me. She said, "Here's another souvenir for you." But she was pretty good about it. Washed it up for me, and I have it in my shadow box that I have at home with my other pieces of shrapnel that I have. But, it's one of those things where you're thankful. Yeah, I still live with shrapnel in me.
Yeah.
A lot of it is in my gut area.
Does it ever work its way out?
Yes,
to where
it has
you can
worked.
pick it out yourself?
Yep, and then I had stainless steel stitches in my stomach because when they did the surgery, they put me back together. They cracked one of my intestines, so they had to go back in there, I think, while I was in Japan. In Japan, they kept me longer than what they should because they didn't know I was going to make it.
Oh.
So I was really having some issues. And one of those was a cramped intestine at the time. So they went back in there, did surgery on that. So I called them noodles. they had a row of noodles, and then underneath they had used stainless steel stitches. So for a long time, my clothes would get caught on them because they'd poke out, just like a little wire, or
Yeah.
something that gets hung up on you. But so I'd have those every once in a while. They'd tug on those and clip them and pull them out. But same with the shrapnel. I've had shrapnel come out of my legs, none out of my arm, and in my back. I've had shrapnel come out of my back.
I can remember my grandpa was in World War II, and he had shrapnel. And I remember as a little kid, it had come to the surface of his forearms and stuff, and he would end up just picking it out of there.
Wow.
Pretty crazy.
He
A
got
lot-
blowed up pretty good.
Yeah.
Did he too?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, a lot of times they don't want to go in, especially with much shrapnel I had. Sometimes it's best just leave it alone.
That's what I've heard.
And I had a piece of shrapnel that was on my spine. I didn't know it till later, and I went to the VA and they took it out because it was in a place where it was eating my spinal. It ate to my spinal cord, so it was eating the bone tissue of my spine. So they had to remove it. But yeah, they don't want to go in there and put you through more surgery than they have to. So anything that's available to pull out right then and there, they'll do it. You got to remember this is kind of a MASH unit. So they kind of put you together trying to get you so you'll survive, basically. And then later on they'll evaluate you. Like myself, they've evaluated me several times on different things that I've had to have done and work on you and remove it if it's necessary at that time. But a lot of times they just leave it in there.
From the time you got injured until you actually made it back to the States, how much time was there? Do you know?
Well, from Yokosuka, Japan, I was there probably 3 weeks, and that's really uncommon, and they don't like to keep you there. They want to ship you back to the States, and what they do is they ask you, who do you have that lives close to one of these hospitals, Walter Reed, or in this case, Oakville Naval Hospital, which is no longer there. It's a Navy hospital. And my choice was a Navy hospital at that time because I had an aunt in Hayward. So they wanted to get you as close to family members because you recover a lot faster being around family. Family visiting you. It helps encourage you to want to get better. And but I remember it was like 2 weeks, and then they put me on a big C-135, or it was like a hospital plane. There was 3 rows of gurneys in that thing, and it was full. And this is a big plane that they can put, big trucks in, probably 5 or 6 troop haulers in there. And there's that many beds. I was on the bottom bed because I had to have suction and oxygen and everything else. The better you are, the higher you're put up. If you have a broken leg or shrapnel in the leg or broken arm from shrapnel or not as bad, they put you on the top bunk, and then the second. I was on the bottom one because I was one of the worst ones. So I flew from Japan all the way to, I want to say, I can't remember what base is up there, El Toro or somewhere up there, but I remember. You got to remember, this is the 60s, and there was a lot of protests going on. I remember being on that gurney, and they had like a school bus, a bus with gurney holders along the walls, and I think that was only too high in there, but I was on the bottom. And as I was being brought out, I remembered that I could hear people hollering, and then even when we were going through the gate, you could hear people hollering at Vietnam vets. And here we were on gurneys and that, and they were still hollering at us, calling us baby killers. I remember that, and a few other choice names and words, but I don't know why I remember that. And then I don't remember anything until I got to the hospital, but I remember that, and what a memory that is. But I remember being treated like that, and then staying in that hospital. I was in the hospital for over a year, but I got to go home. When I went to Vietnam, I weighed 170, and I was in pretty good shape. When I came back, when I was at Yokosuka, I weighed 107 pounds. Wow. So I'd lost 70 pounds in all this ordeal. And I don't know if they weighed me there or when I got to Oakland, but I weighed 107 pounds from 170. You could count each rib in my body. My legs didn't look like there was any meat on them at all. They looked like just bones. I looked like a skeleton, really, with a little bit of meat on them, on my body. And I remember there, and I get kind of emotional when I tell this part of it, but my aunt finally got a hold of, or they got a hold of my aunt, and my aunt wanted to come and visit me. And I didn't want her to come and visit. And the worst thing was, you got to remember, from Montello, Utah border, to Oakland, California, my mom and dad never had a car. We didn't have a phone. So for them to get to Oakland, they had to take the train. And I had my little baby brother. He was like, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years old, if that. But going to the hospital, and my mom, I knew my mom and dad were coming, and I didn't want my mom to see me like that. I didn't want my aunt to see me the way I was, skin and bone. And I was in one of those circular electric beds because I had damage to my back and my gut. So they would rotate me so I wouldn't get bed sores and stuff like this. I don't remember how long I was in that, but I was in that for a long time. And when my aunt came to see me first, I cried. Because I didn't want her to see me like that. And I hadn't seen her for probably about 20-something years. But she was a character. All the guys liked her. She had mini skirt on because that was the mini skirt generation, and all the guys thought my aunt was hot. I didn't tell my uncle that, but
That's hilarious.
my aunt would bring Mexican food in to us. She would smuggle beer into us. My friends like that, especially my one friend later that I found out
I bet.
that was with me when we went up and retrieved 1-9's body. He got wounded that day. I didn't know that he almost bled to death. I thought he was in better shape than that. We brought him back to the rear and left him. Almost left him to die, but he lost his hand later on because of that. But he was like my guard. Anything I wanted, he would walk in front of my, I could see him. And there was a saying that we had badass Gyrene. And so one time when he was walking by, I guess he must have seen my record or knew it was Hernandez there, and he knew me. Because we'd gone through training in that, and we went to Vietnam together. He goes, Hernandez, is that you badass Gyrene? I says, yeah, that's me. Who's this? He says, it's Tail. I said, oh, you badass Gyrene. So he kind of took care of me, and that's the way we talked to each other, you know. But I was worried about him. He'd take my Darvon for pain. I didn't want to get hooked on morphine. I was on morphine. And later they put me on Darvon, you know, for pain. And he'd say, you going to take that? And I'd go, nope. He'd say, okay. So later he became addicted to it a little bit. But and then I was on a beer ration since I didn't have very much weight. I could have a beer at lunch before my meal and one at dinner. So first time I had a beer, man, I thought, man, I was going to get wiped out. I only had a couple of drinks of it. But he'd say, you going to drink that? And I go, no, go ahead. So he'd drink it.
Was this smuggled beer, or were they did?
No, this
let
was
you-
beer that the hospital actually gave me.
Oh.
Yeah. The military gave me this for weight, appetite.
Oh, okay.
So it was a government-issued deal. And then I smoked, too. I smoked about 2 packs of cigarettes a day, you know, in Vietnam. But sometimes we only had the little 5 or 6 pack cigarette deal. But so I was smoking. And I remember asking the doctor one time, I says, God, when can I have a cigarette? Because, you know, I was still craving cigarette. I'd been there for a while. He said, I'll let you know when you can have a cigarette. And I still had the tube in a drainage in my lung, if I remember right. And then they took that out finally, and they got me up. I couldn't even walk. I had 2 nurses, or male or female, and they helped me walk, and I couldn't because my left leg was in a cast because I later lost a toe, and you know, it was kind of hard for me to get around. But finally, the doctor says, he come in one day and said, "Okay, Hernandez, you can have a cigarette," and he lit up. You know, at that time he lit up for
Yeah.
me, and he come over there and sat down with a pack of cigarettes there. And he set the pack of cigarettes on my bed, and he says, "Here you go." He took a drag out of it, and I don't even know if he smoked or not, but I took a big drag out of that cigarette, and man, I started coughing. That cigarette about killed me. And I was hollering, and I think I cussed at the doctor. I said, "You trying to kill me?" And I threw the cigarette out in the middle of the hall because it was a barracks type deal. And I threw the pack of cigarettes out there, and I never touched another cigarette after that.
Wow.
I quit right there.
Cold turkey.
Yeah.
So, but it was one of those situations where, man, I wanted a cigarette bad, but after
You
that,
thought,
my
no.
stitches were
I bet.
hurting.
I was wondering.
grabbed a pill. He gave me a pillow finally, and after I coughed a few times without it, and it felt like my gut was just going to come out of my stomach, and I'm coughing. Talk about a come to Jesus moment right there. Man. So that was my experience with the cigarette. Teo, of course, he later got married about the same time I did, and his wife helped him out a lot. I got to finally see him, probably 15 or years later. He lives in Rawlins, Wyoming. He's a one-handed mechanic, one of the best, well, maybe the only mechanic there, but he tears the engines down and everything else. He had a Harley, and I think he sold it. He had a Harley before he went into service, and he was going to try to figure out how to be able to ride the Harley with a hook and stuff like that, but I don't know if he ever did or not. But I met him, and what a turnaround guy. I always thought he'd end up in prison or something, because we were in the bar one time. You got to remember some of these Korean veterans, they were hardcore too, but it was a Navy guy sitting on a stool. And Teo and I come in the bar. I'm kind of limping in one, and he's got his hook on. He's left-handed, and we go in there to have a beer. I don't remember what time of the day it was, probably 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And we go in there, and this guy made a comment about Vietnam vets and how, we didn't deserve what we were getting. We didn't deserve anything. And my friend Teo reached around there and with his left hand hit him with his hook. Hit him in the temple of the head. I thought, oh shit, he probably killed this guy.
Yeah.
And that guy just rolled right off the stool like you see in a movie. I mean, like right now. And he's face down on the floor, and I'm going, oh shit, we got to get out of there. And the bartender's saying the MPs and the short patrol are coming, and you guys are, going to jail and everything. We ran out that door, and we're hobbling up. I'm hobbling up. He's ahead of me, pulling me. And we get up to by where our room is, because it's a barracks type, and it's all wooden decking and everything. We finally make it up there. We get in there. There's a big puzzle at the end of the room, a round table, and took our robes off because they knew we had our robes on. They didn't know our names and that. And I don't know if they knew that, well, he had known that he had a hook on that side, but we didn't get our beer. But we got back to the back, and we played like we were putting a puzzle together. Here comes the law, short patrol MPs. Have you seen 2 guys going through here, up around here? We said, well, we heard 2 guys going up, running like, a bat out or whatever up there. So, okay, thank you very much. And we got out of that one, but I thought for sure, I don't know whatever happened to that guy, but I thought for sure my friend Teo had killed that guy.
Oh wow.
I mean, he was doing the fish out of water dance, and I'm going, oh man, I don't know if he was having a seizure or what, but I guess you don't say that to a Vietnam vet, especially with a hook.
Yeah, really.
You got what you call a hook shot.
A left hook.
Yeah, real left hook. But that was my experience with that part of it, that you asked. But
I would imagine you probably get a lot more respect now, like you deserve now.
yeah.
I mean, it's.
Well, it's us, the Vietnam vets, made it possible for
Right.
Iraq, our Desert Storm, Iraq and Afghanistan. You see how they got treated. We spoiled them. But I never said, as a Vietnam vet, I'm going to make sure this never happens to another generation. It's like the way we lived and we had to live, that we kind of all made our own promise, and it was the same promise that we basically made when we got treated that way. We would never let another generation get treated like we did.
So
We never did.
I'm kind of ignorant as far as like the different wars. As far as that, did other did a lot of other wars there was a lot of drafting going on as much as the Vietnam War, or was the Vietnam War like one of the wars that more people got drafted? You know what I mean?
I think so, maybe so, because like during World War II, a lot of veterans joined the military like 9/11.
Yeah.
You know, they joined. They didn't
Yeah.
ask.
Yeah.
It was kind of so pre to that. Korea and World War II veterans that I can think of were like the 911.
Yeah. My dad was he was in the Korean War,
See that?
and he actually forged his birth certificate a year to join.
Yeah.
And you know, and I guess that back in those days it wasn't that uncommon. People really wanted to join. You know,
Yeah, you had 15 and 16-year-old kids.
that's what he was.
Yeah.
He was 16,
Yeah.
and he was actually 15, forged it to 16, and had to get his parents' permission to join.
Well, and you can imagine, like when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor and what they did. And basically, if you go back, I don't like comparing wars to other wars, but you look at 9/11, what they did with the Twin Towers and the other plane. It kind of brought young people that were of that age a sense of, I don't want to say it, a sense of pleasure wanting to serve their country for what had happened. In
It was
other
on
words,
our
a
soil.
payback. Yeah, it was it was like a payback.
Yeah.
So during my time, there was, as you know, not a lot, but some veterans or some people that were of age burnt their draft cards, or they went to Canada to avoid the draft. But I signed up for, I knew where I was going, but what the Marines did was kind of unique. Some of the guys that I went in with, we were all lined up. And I knew this because it was a fact, but I'd heard about it. They said, okay, all of my Marines that signed up for the Marine Corps, take one step back. So we took one step back. Sometimes they'd do one step forward. And then he'd go down the line, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and clear to the end. And he says, okay, and he might do the twos or might do the ones. He says, all ones are now Marines. And you should have heard the crying. You can't do that to us. We got drafted in the Army. No, you may have been, you were drafted.
Wow.
So they got drafted into the Marine Corps. And then those that got drafted in the Army, you know, they usually only had to do like the 2 years because they got drafted for 2 years or in some cases 1 year, but I can't remember what exactly it was. But they were drafted. And that's what happened. Some of them that thought they weren't going to have to join the Marine Corps, but that's the way they did it.
Huh.
Yeah, there was probably more draftees at that time because of the protests and a lot of the probably the ones serving that didn't volunteer for probably didn't want to go to war, so they got drafted if they didn't go to Canada. So yeah, that was probably the bigger one. I don't have any stats on that, but I'm probably sure that that's probably the.
You don't really hear much about drafting, like in the previous wars or whatever you hear. But Vietnam War, it was like, you know, I was pretty young then, but I do remember families we knew, and you'd hear so and so's kid got drafted, you know, and stuff, and
Well, it was a bad time. And 1967, going into 1968, they needed bodies over there.
Yeah.
So they cut the mine amount of boot camp, I think a week or two, and then my advanced infantry training, they cut it short too. And my drill instructor said afterwards, we went back for a reunion, my outfit did, to Camp Pendleton, and they said that was the worst thing we did is cut the time down of training. But they needed bodies
I'll say
over
they
there.
needed it. Huh?
Yeah, they needed bodies over there regardless. You know, they just needed a body over there, and we lost so many guys during that time.
Because of that. Huh?
Training, yep. No,
Did you went through your full training?
I didn't go through full training. I got
You
cut
either,
short
huh?
too.
Oh wow.
So, and I think the just latter part of '67 is when they started cutting the amount of time that you went into boot camp and then advanced infantry training.
Wow.
So then I went to jungle training in Okinawa, where they taught us booby traps and stuff like this. And then if not to be caught, but if you were a prisoner of war, Our main objective was not to get caught.
Yeah.
But if we did get caught, they taught us different things. You know, one of the things that they taught us is that if at all possible, you try to escape, you know, and then remember your surroundings so you could report back. So, and that's the way we were trained. But yeah, they worked on us pretty good on that in that part. So I'm glad they didn't cut that short. But yeah, they took us to Okinawa, and then from Okinawa they flew us out of there and went to Hawaii, and then from Hawaii, I think it went to Vietnam from there. So you got to go to Hawaii. It was a refueling and pilot change. We got off the plane. They had guards at the end of the airport to make sure nobody left. I go, yeah, it was peachy.
I've been to Hawaii.
Yeah,
that's
in that airport,
experience.
it was open in the top where they put us. They took us from their plane, and we could go up these stairs, and it was all like a big deck up on top, which was open, and that's where they let us hang out. They didn't have a pop machine or anything like that. No contraband.
Oh man.
We got to just get off and relax, or get off for a while until they refueled the plane and got new pilots and stuff like that. And then we went on, to,
No beach time.
no beach time. We could see the beach. Yeah.
When you got back to, to California, where you stayed there and got better, and then is that when you relocated back to? Montello? Is that when you came back then?
After I got out, everything, they gave me discharge after a year in the hospital. I came back I went back to Montello, and I can't remember, I want to say I wore my uniform, but they told us not to wear our uniforms.
Because of all the protesting and all
Yeah,
that stuff.
it was not politically correct, and we would be harassed, and if they knew me, I would love it, but I wasn't in fighting shape, though. I mean, they could have probably done something to me, but I remember I can't remember, I think I took a bus, and I can't remember, or they flew me to Salt Lake, and from Salt Lake, I took a Greyhound, I guess, and I went to Wales, and I knew the bus would be going to Montello because it was a school bus. And I knew they would probably let me ride the school bus. And they did. And, in fact, I can't remember if I went to Wales or if I got dropped off at Oasis, which is a connector road to Montello, Route 23. It seems to me I might have done that. And the bus picked me up.
Did your parents, were you able to get a hold and let them know you're coming home and all that?
Yep, my mom and dad, after several visitations to the hospital, and I got to tell you this part, as a young boy, my baby brother, he does stuff with that Upward Bound program in Reno for veterans. No one else served in the military after I got hurt. I don't think they wanted to pick on anybody in my household because my two brothers, they had really low numbers in the top 20, if I remember right. But they had deferments because they were going to college.
Oh, yeah.
So, and then again, because I was hurt so bad, they never called on them to serve in the military. So my baby brother is just a little guy then, and you got to remember somebody, if you know any kids, you're 5 years old, or you think about your own kids at that age, being traumatized by seeing somebody with no arms, no legs, bandaged up totally, or in some cases, their faces deformed, until they get the plastic surgery on them, completely rebuilt. My baby brother was that way, and he tells me to this day sometimes he's saying, I have PTSD, he says, because what I saw. And I said, well, you could have, because that was something else. Here you got a young kid growing up in a, small town, not even a town, it's a ranching community or whatever, railroad community. And to have to see something like that, just think of your own kids having to see something like that. But he wanted to be with me, see me. But he never forgot that. And he remembers when the car at that time, if you see Taking Chance, you'll see a car come up. And the military got away from that. Later they had them come in taxis or other modes, because when you saw that green car, you knew something bad was coming up. And they parked the green car in front of your house. that meant you either died or something bad happened. In my case, it was something bad happened. So two officers came to Montello, and my baby brother was down at the gas station, and he heard him talking to the guy that owned the gas station was Al Stansel. And he heard him talking. He just, you know where the Hernandez Estrada house is? And they go, yeah, just down the road. And my baby brother was there, and he was in the back. He saw this car, and he just kind of stayed back and listened to what was going on. So we said, we got some bad news. We need to see the Hernandez family. And so my baby brother ran from, it's about a block and a half, down the alley, beat those guys in the car to my house. So he already knew what was going to happen. And my mom and dad were both home. I think it was on a weekend. And he heard him come to the door, and they told my mom what had happened, that I'd been wounded really bad, but I was getting the best care of it. And they would try to keep me posted as I got better or something happened. But my baby brother, and I had it posted at one time, but he writes a story, and it's called The Green Car. And it's basically a story of how he felt when that green car came to the house. And I've shared that story with a lot of people. And I put it on Facebook once, but I shared his story of how he felt being a young boy, maybe 5 or 6 years old, and having to hear them come up to the house and say something like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a lot of things that told me I need to write a book. I didn't write a book, but my story is kind of like this story here is that we're talking about. The Library of Congress did a story on Vietnam vets, and I got another guy to go, and then he told him my story, and no, you need to go, and I was working, so for Cowboy Poetry, I'm a van driver. So I said, no, I'm not going to go, and then finally they talked me into going. 2 different times we tried to do a filming of it. It never worked out. The 3rd time was a charm, I guess, because at the college during Cowboy Poetry, they did this for a lot of their veterans, not just myself, but they wanted to do my story. And we're like probably here, we talked for about 6 hours, 5 or 6 hours. I mean, it's amazing. I don't know how much time we've been here.
We're not
but
worried about it.
I know,
at all,
but you don't
yeah,
even
goes
think
back-
about it when you're
does go-
talking, you're just
Yeah.
talking, and
Right.
time goes fast. And
Yeah.
I couldn't believe I'd talked that long.
Got a lot to say.
Kind of like right now, you just start on a subject and it brings memories about something else. But
Yeah.
yeah, I talk. So my story is what I wanted to say is in the Library of Congress.
That's cool.
You can do my name, Gilbert Hernandez, and there's a place that my story is kind of like here. I talk about my childhood, kind of like a little bit here, and about different phases of my life coming back, and not it like this that I'll talk about getting into archery, after being a rifle hunter too. But it's one of those things that you do, and I didn't write a book, but I do have oral history
Right.
Yeah.
in the Library of Congress.
That's
Oh, wow.
really cool.
And then plus, you guys had an opportunity to see Graves' story. He's a wild man. You think
Yeah.
you see why he is the way he is, but
Right.
he's got PTSD really bad, but he's been dealing with it, and the things he does for veterans, I think, helps him a lot. But
I bet you too. I know
yeah.
you said that it does help a lot. You're
yep.
giving back for sure, and you've probably helped so many more people than you realize, touched so many people's lives in a positive way.
And you just said it right there. I don't need to write a book. Everybody that I ever talked to is part of my story, and they got their story that we've had an opportunity to share.
Yeah.
Just like you guys.
Yeah.
You guys will have my story and is your story because you got to talk to me and
Yeah.
and listen to what I have to say.
Yeah.
But not only that, but we're trying to reach other people out there. And the reason I tell my story, no matter how bad you get hurt or how bad it seems that you want to take your life, like some of my friends have, that I wasn't able to help, you can live through it. And like the doctor told me when I wanted to die, I said, Doc, I want to die. I kept telling him that. He says, Marine, I want to tell you something. He says, it hurts to get better. And that was so true. no matter what situation you're, whether it's dealing with wounds or wounds from what people say to you, it hurts to get better.
Mentally, physically, or mentally. Huh?
Yeah, and people work on you differently than myself being wounded. People hurt our kids or people that we love, and they take their own lives is because, it hurts to get better. And that's why I said, and I'm hoping that me telling my story, they see what I've gone through. And let me tell you something, I hurt for over a year. And sometimes I still hurt as I get older because those wounds start creeping up on you. And Mr. Arthritis comes in there and stops you from doing a lot of things too. But that's my encouragement is to anyone that's been hurt either by a, accident or a wound of kind, or mentally by a bully or somebody that tried to make them feel smaller than what they are. Each one of us is our own individual, and never give up. Never let somebody tell you you can't do something, like I was told, that you probably can't do that. Well, I would never walk again. Here I am walking. If you have the determination and God, I got to give thanks. My mom was real religious, and she'd always say prayers for me. And it was maybe God's faith that I was there. And as you know, I honestly believe that my outdoors is my church. I don't go to church. Mom had me go to catechism when I was younger, but my brother and I would hide when we were little kids, we'd hide behind the incinerator out back from the priest so we wouldn't have to go to catechism. He got smart and caught us at the back door one time because my mom told him what we were doing.
That's hilarious.
So, a moment of laughter there.